Hey everyone, Margarita here. This is going to be part 6 of my severe carbon monoxide poisoning. I had left off with, at the end of 2017, I was slowly just losing all types of functioning, had literally no daily functioning left other than barely keeping my little baby alive and getting to and from work on the weekend. I was literally doing nothing else. All the work on my house had stopped. All the rest of the painting, the few things that we intended on finishing fairly quickly, all had to stop immediately. And it actually took about 3 or 4 years from there before any of that stuff ever got picked back up to be finished down the line. And it was not me doing it either. It was my dad who ended up doing some of that. So I'll get into that part a little later, when I get to that point in the story, but I literally couldn't finish any of the tasks that had to be done on the house that I bought. The house was kind of a wreck for it being a newer constructed home. It was probably the lowest priced home in the subdivision at that time and the least maintained home out of all of them, which is how I got such a good deal on it, which was actually more like close to market value at that time. So it's not like it wasn't cheap by any means. But I did end up like getting some type of good deal, but that is because I had to put the work in myself to restore it. But all of that stopped right at the end of 2017. None of that continued on. I just kept laying there, didn't know what was wrong, couldn't figure it out. I was just laying there. I had also noticed at one point they were playing with the foyer doors. There was 2 sets of doors in the front of the restaurant and in the foyer. And I noticed the employees, the owner, the management, I don't know who exactly was all over there. And I think maybe even a handyman or somebody was over there as well. But they were playing with the doors in the front and somebody was talking about some type of gas. Now, nobody ever mentioned a name of a gas, but they did kept pulling on the door that goes to the outside, the door that goes to the inside. I don't know what caused them to think gas or smell gas, because there wasn't a smell. I don't know if it had to do with the way the doors were sticking or who noticed this or what prompted them to even look into this, but that did happen. That happened shortly before this. Like I said, there was many different building problems that were occurring throughout the entire building during this time, this additional year basically that I had spent there. These little building issues were happening along the way. And another issue I noticed with that building is the moisture would be building up on the windows, and there were spots where it was dripping from the ceiling as well. They were actually putting buckets out. And some of this was even going on during the time when I was extremely overloaded. They're heavily trying to cover it up. And, they're just setting buckets out on the floor like this was normal. And it was actually, that's carbon monoxide. If that amount of moisture is building up in the building in that manner, that's carbon monoxide. So this had happened on numerous occasions at this restaurant. And at one point they had somebody outside working on the roof thinking this is a roof leak. And at no time was this a roof leak. This was the moisture building up on the ceiling in the inside part of the building and on the windows. And that's what was causing that. But I did not know this yet at this time because I had seen this happen numerous times. It was not until I was already overloaded that I had figured all this out. And, like I said, these symptoms can come out when somebody gets poisoned by carbon monoxide. It can be pieced together backwards. Many times it does get pieced together after the fact, backwards in time. You don't figure it out until it's too late. And I know I'm not the only person in that boat. There is plenty of other cases just like that where it is figured out backwards in time. And there would be no other way to figure it out until someone around you or you yourself are in an extreme state of emergency, knowing something's terribly wrong. That's when you get prompted to work backwards and figure out where you've been and what you've been doing. I wish I still had the list, but I had a list of about 20 things I thought it may possibly be causing it when I first woke up, messed up. I can't remember what was on it. One of them was carbon monoxide. I think I had even put on there the mercury what are they called? Amalgam or something fillings. At some point, I had put that on there. I had put numerous things. The fireplace in my house, I had put like several things on there. It was none of those things. It was the restaurant. I just didn't have the source at the time. And my fireplace has actually been shut off at the source since the day I wrote that list, shortly after moving in, not really knowing what the source was. But it's actually been shut off, you know, so you can't even turn it on if you wanted to. And I did that to make sure nobody accidentally like flips the switch, because you can turn it on with just a flip of a switch. So it was not questionable by the time I had figured this out, what was actually causing it. As time went on and my head stayed pressed against my skull, it narrowed down what it could be, because there's nothing that causes your brain to be pressed against your skull like that continuously with no relief, on and on and on and on. So as time went on, other things began falling off the list. So it was not too hard to figure out. And then once I returned, I started gathering the information. But yes, there would be different types of building issues going on. Suction problems with the door, the drains backing up, odd smells in the building, the air feels really heavy. That's not something you're really going to notice. Maybe some people do, but the air feels very heavy, and it's warmer as well. So, you know, some people can notice that's carbon monoxide. Even if you're not experiencing any symptoms, that's carbon monoxide. So, you know, part of the problem was my shifts were on the weekend, and these other employees were there during the week. And they were there about 40 hours a week, all of them, spread out throughout the week. The other thing is many of them smoked cigarettes. That puts them, they can handle more carbon monoxide. They're also frequently going outside, whereas I was never leaving the building in the first place. The whole time I was in there, I would just stay in there. So that's another factor, the fact that my hemoglobin was low, and then I'd already been suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning from giving birth while suffering from it with a brain injury, just unknowingly. When you factor all that in, that is why I overloaded first. And the rest of these people only had a one-day migraine about 2 weeks into this. The same week that my brain had swelled at home. That all happened in the same couple days with all of us. I did have employees' names written down, a list of them. I don't believe I have that notebook anymore. And plus the other symptoms they were experiencing as well. So I would pull that out, but I don't think I have that anymore. Now I did wake up. I woke up on 1/11/2018 with my brain pressed against my skull. When I went to bed the night before, everything was, I guess you could say, normal. It wasn't really normal, because now this has been going on for almost 2 years at this point, where stuff's not right. I still don't know what's wrong. I'm not functioning properly. But I guess you could say fairly normal for what was going on. And then I woke up like that on 1/11/18. My brain just completely burnt to a crisp, brain pressed against my skull, and it was about 50, 60 severe symptoms at once. So many that I could not describe what I was feeling or what was going on, because these are all internal. The carbon monoxide displaces the oxygen in your cells and in your blood, and it creates all these other issues to occur because your body's not processing the oxygen properly. It's being blocked by carbon monoxide. So what you're feeling is lack of oxygen, and it's being blocked by a toxin that's blocking it from absorbing into your system properly, which is in turn causing all of these crazy issues. Like you can't concentrate, and it's extreme. Every single symptom I was experiencing was very, very extreme. Extreme brain swelling. It was brain swelling at this point, continuous swelling, throbbing up and down on the back left side. There was knots of it all up top. It was burnt to a crisp, radiating out my ears. My eyes are watering, my nose, my mouth. I had all these issues, like it was like extreme anxiety, but it wasn't anxiety. It's your heart pounding from lack of oxygen to the brain and the heart and the cells and the lungs. Your entire body is being deprived of oxygen everywhere. So that's actually what those feelings were. And then I couldn't communicate properly. I couldn't even spit out the sentences. I was just screaming. I couldn't have sound. All my senses were messed up. I mean, it was literally 50, 60 symptoms at once when I went to bed, it was not like that at all. And mind you, I had absolutely no medical history. For 20 years prior to stepping foot into this building, When I was 30 weeks pregnant and stepped foot into that building, I had literally no medical history whatsoever. So, you know, that's a big red flag right there. I was not a part of the medical system. I did not have a primary doctor until I got the one I had at the beginning of 2017 after returning to the place. Prior to that, there was no primary doctor on file because I was not a part of the medical system. So all these factors should be screaming like, hey, something's terribly wrong. If there has never been anything wrong in the past, something is terribly wrong. So once I overloaded and all the information came out working backwards, I was able to figure out, I pieced it all together. And, you know, when you start digging backwards a little further and a little further, and you're trying to figure out how long this is, once you have the source, you're trying to figure out how long this has been going on for. And then you start thinking all the way back to the beginning. It was very clear because there was quite a few symptoms during pregnancy as well. It was just going unnoticed, or they weren't really paying attention to it. They knew something was wrong. So I don't know why they didn't question this. They knew I had never worked at this place before. They knew I was supplementing my income. I don't know why nobody ever questioned that, but it should have been a big red flag for these midwives to look into why suddenly all these things were wrong with me. But it was nothing to where they were like, oh, stop working, it's urgent, like nothing like that. But there was definitely something seriously that turned wrong that was not wrong prior. So all these things just got overlooked by so many people. I was just screaming in an extreme state of distress, not really knowing what was wrong. I had a baby who was, the behavioral issues were going harder and stronger and longer. It's just ongoing for hours and hours and hours on end, every day, all day. This went on for almost 5 years. So this was going on when I woke up like that, and it made it even harder because I couldn't have sound and this baby's whining and screaming. And then my older kids are like arguing and they're turning on TVs and sounds, and it was terrible. It was like living in hell and never coming out of it. And I stayed that way. I legitimately stayed living in hell for a little over 3 years before I began to break free from the actual hell I was living in, because there is no other comparison to what I was dealing with. So, you know, being stuck like that, I woke up that way on a Thursday. So mind you, I hadn't been in this building since Sunday. 4 days later, I did not know there was such thing as delayed neurologic sequela. And that is when you have a very large carbon monoxide exposure, and the effects of it are delayed by days, weeks, and it can even be sometimes up to 2 months. So that makes it even harder to figure out if that's how it's like presented, and it becomes known that there's something wrong, if that's the case. So 4 days later, it made it that much more confusing. And, you know, I figured out later, I did not know right this moment, but it took a few weeks. I did figure out that what was happening during that time is the restaurant was operating without the ventilation system working at all. And this had happened numerous times. And it is because that carbon monoxide alarm inside the hoods, inside the ventilation system, was going off because there was high levels of carbon monoxide. So they would shut it off. So it was not running at all. So they operated numerous times without it working at all. So that means the levels in there were extremely high, on top of always having some type of continuous type of reading in the building pretty much the whole time I worked there. They then operated without it working at all. And that's what I figured out. And that's how I woke up with such a large overload all those days later. It was a very large amount I had taken in. And I just was unaware that they had done that at that time. So it came out later that they were doing that, and it happened numerous times. So that is another issue. I have read thousands and thousands of case studies on different cases of carbon monoxide poisoning and brain injuries, both. I've done so much reading because I was literally completely homebound for about 3.5 years straight. And all I did, other than fall in and out of consciousness because I couldn't stand up, what I did was read. I would read and read and read and dig for answers and read and try to figure out how to save our lives and read and read and read and listen to people talk from time to time and podcasts and whatnot, which then kind of spun me back around and pointed me in the right direction to somehow pick up the pieces of my life and get back on a modified path. Because at this time, I did not know if there was ever going to be a future. I did not know if I was going to leave the 4 walls of my house. I couldn't even leave like the one room. It would take hours to get from room to room. So I just was not sure. But but I will be back with another one. Thanks, bye.